After the Renpi-in, a more exciting woman was brought to the dining table, which was about to become the barbecue for Thanksgiving. Watching a woman's feet coated with olive oil scared everyone else crazy, because after grilling the woman, it was their turn to start their story on the day before Thanksgiving. A supermarket in the small town launched a midnight purchase for 0 yuan, but only for the top 100 customers. As soon as the news came out, many people gathered at the entrance of the supermarket, hoping to grab free spots. Seeing so many people, the supermarket staff accelerated the speed of tallying, and the security guards also worked hard to maintain order. When there were only 10 minutes left to leave the door, the crowd became restless. Because the daughter of the supermarket owner, Alice, unexpectedly entered the supermarket early with a few friends through the employee entrance. Not only that, they also show off to the people outside while picking things. The customers who have been waiting for a long time immediately boil. They push down the fence at all costs and then rush towards the supermarket. The security guard saw the situation and wanted to open the glass door, but the crowd who sealed the batch did not give him time to aim at the keyhole. People rushed in under the security guard, and one person was squeezed against the glass shards of the doorframe, but he still struggled in just to grab a box of discounted milk. People are like the end of the world, braving for the safety of others. When they see the security guard still breathing and curling their hair, they want to climb over to save him, but they are only trampled on and their wrist is broken. After the blonde stumbled, he crawled forward in fear, trying to find a place to hide without anyone. But at this moment, Pang Jia killed the blonde girl and viciously moved forward and backward, rolling her hair into the wheel and tearing off her scalp. People used this chaos to vent their inner anger recklessly, until the police chief arrived to control the stampede incident. The Thanksgiving special sale unexpectedly turned into a massacre, and the victim's family accused the supermarket owner of mishandling. However, the surveillance video of that night was deleted, so the owner was not held accountable, and the supermarket was operating normally. And the next year's Thanksgiving, the boss also wants to hold a larger scale parade. Little did they know that this year's Thanksgiving would be a feast for butchers. The first person to suffer was Pang Jia, who accidentally killed a blonde woman. She was doing odd jobs in a restaurant. After listening to her friend find a job in 58.com, Pang Jia closed the door early and wanted to celebrate for her friend. But at that moment, he found a mask on the counter that looked very scary, so he casually threw it into the trash can. But then, a man wearing the same mask appeared. After hitting Pang Jia, he swung a knife and struck her palm. The man grabbed her hair and pressed her into the pool. 30 seconds later, Pang Jia was pulled out, but soon the man opened the door of the freezer and pressed her face against the ice. However, in order to escape, he still peeled off his face and ran into the lounge. Pang Jia took out her phone and wanted to call the police, but because she couldn't recognize the disfigured Pang Jia, she couldn't open it at all. Just as Pang Jia was about to despair, he saw from the surveillance footage that the killer seemed to have left, and there was a clear sound of the door closing outside. Pang Jia quickly grabbed her bag and ran desperately towards her car, but unfortunately, he couldn't find the car key. Little did they know that the killer was already sitting in his car at this moment. Just as Pang Jia was in shock, the car accelerated towards him and saw a trash can ahead. Pang Jia wanted to hide inside, but just as he was about to overturn, the car collided and Pang Jia was cut in half. The next day, his lower body was hung at the supermarket entrance. People couldn't help but think of the shadow of last year's Thanksgiving death. The sheriff quickly had the body covered, but Alice and his friends all received this half-body photo. The sheriff suspected that the killer had witnessed the stampede last year, so he launched targeted retaliation. However, to find the person, a complete video from that time must be provided. Reese immediately stated that his father had a video backup and he could steal it, but that night, the killer appeared at the security guard's house again. He wrapped a wire around the guard's neck, and in no time, the guard accidentally separated. However, the killer brought his head home and placed it on the plate to take a photo, which was sent to Alice. Alice was so scared that she called the police, but the killer's phone had already been turned off and the location information could not be traced at all. Alice had to copy the video and hand it over to the sheriff, hoping to quickly locate the suspicious person. But after watching the video, the sheriff reminded Lisa to be careful. This sentence did not alert Alice, but death was getting closer and closer to her. Lisa's best friend was training at the gym when she suddenly thought of several good poses and pulled her boyfriend over to showcase them. But just as she was performing to her heart's content, her boyfriend's neck spun 180 degrees with a click, and the girl who was jumping on her back was unaware. Just as the girl jumped up, a sharp knife appeared on the trampoline, facing the girl's foot. In no time, the girl was stabbed all over and fell on the jumping bed, but the final blow hit the girl's heart. After this incident, the gymnasium was sealed off, but a young couple saw that it was quiet and deserted, so they wanted to go in for a date. But as soon as they entered the hallway, a figure suddenly appeared, and Alice, who heard her friend scream, immediately ran to find the two of them. Looking at the pitch-black hallway, Alice was a bit scared and quickly sent a message to her friend, but the phone beep came from the trash can. Alice walked over and saw her friend's phone lying inside. Alice picked up her phone in confusion, but as soon as the screen was pressed down, she pushed the man away with the trash can and desperately threw him out of the hallway, hiding in the school dressing room. But the man quickly chased after him. This place was filled with model heads and there was no place to hide people. The man immediately chopped wildly, and as he approached, Lise, who was hiding in the model's head, trembled with fear. Seeing a pair of scissors not far away, he reached out to get them. The next second, the man who heard the sound immediately walked up with an axe in hand. "Help me in there, we know hell." Fortunately, the man did not come after him. Lise successfully escaped, but when faced with the sheriff's inquiry, Lise looked bewildered. The other person is wearing a mask, and Lise didn't even see their appearance clearly. But soon Lise remembered that the masked man seemed to have been following him and his friends since a few days ago. She is very familiar with Alice's itinerary and should be an acquaintance. As expected, soon Alice's other best friend was born. She was digging her ears at home when a man appeared behind her. The girl probably wouldn't have to dig her ears again in her lifetime. Seeing that the girl's phone was still on the phone, the man picked up the phone and showed Alice the girl's miserable situation. However, the girl took the opportunity to pull out the awl and then desperately crawled outward. But the girl's father was already killed by a man. Watching the girl finally climb to the staircase, the man grabbed her hair and grabbed her back. Fortunately, Alice and Xiaohei happened to arrive nearby at this moment, but as soon as they entered, the man took the girl hostage and retreated to the tent that had just been set up. Lisi had a bad premonition and urged Xiaohei to quickly shoot, but this guy was using a gun for the first time. Just as he was frantically manipulating the pistol, the chainsaw was suddenly opened, and blood splattered everywhere. Lisi was so scared that he started to twitch. When Xiaohei hugged the girl, he was hopeless, but the killer escaped again. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and as usual, there will be street parades. However, under the shadow of death, Alice has no intention of marching. However, the crowd is chaotic tomorrow, and if it's a good time for the killer to take action, she contacted the police for personal protection, hoping to use her own ears to lure the killer out. After the parade entered a frenzy, a masked man appeared in the crowd. Lisi thought it was the killer maniac, but there was actually more than one person wearing the same mask. The police couldn't distinguish who the culprit was for a moment. Just as the police were investigating one by one, a clown walked straight up and cut off the little yellow duck's head with an axe. The crowd immediately became chaotic, and the murderer appeared. The police quickly covered the escape of the Lise family. Just as they were hiding in the car, the Joker poked his head in and gave each of them an anesthetic. Then the Joker took advantage of the chaos and drove away the Lise family. What was waiting for them was a unique Thanksgiving meat marinade. After selecting a pot of spicy sauce, he put Lisa's mother on the table and prepared to grill it. In no time, Mom woke up and ran out of the room desperately to avoid being roasted. But the killer didn't hesitate and threw a fork from behind. Half an hour later, the perverted man prepared and lifted the woman onto the dining table. He used a brush to brush the oil from bottom to top on his toes, and sprinkled a layer of salt on the oil. As a flirtatious idea, coriander flowers on his toes were also essential. After completing these, the woman was stuffed into the oven. Under the scorching heat of 210 degrees, a woman who had lost blood and was unconscious was woken up by the heat. Just as he was howling in pain, the oven was opened and the woman thought the man was going to let him out, but then a needle pierced into his body. Haha, in no time, women won't be able to happen again. "10 minutes later, the aroma of meat wafted out of the oven, and the hospitable pervert man even tied up the woman's family and arranged for them to sit down. After that, the meat was served on the table. Watching his wife's miserable situation, the supermarket owner let out a painful roar and then vomited. The others present were even more frightened, as it was their turn to enter the oven next. Fortunately, at this time, the police found the murderer's live broadcast IP and saw that multiple people were kidnapped. The police immediately dispatched a large number of police forces to the scene, but upon inspection, they found that they had been tricked. The murderer had only recorded a video in advance and was then using his mobile phone to live stream, creating a highly imitated real hostage at the scene. At this moment, he was warmly entertained by the killer. He stabbed a girl in the neck, poured out a glass of red wine, and then placed it on the table to wake up. Smelling the strong smell of blood, everyone was a bit tipsy. But then the killer took off the cloth from the boy's mouth and asked him to say the most grateful thing last year to the live broadcast camera. The boy immediately shouted at the camera. The boy was so disobedient that he was immediately taught a lesson. He was beaten to pieces by the killer, and everyone else was scared to the point of silence, never daring to say another word. The killer just started talking. "Now,
But I have your You're probably wondering why you're still alive. And they were all killed. They were just greedy. But you're the VIPs. It wasn't enough to get in the store early. You had to taunt everyone outside to show them how special you were. Well, once this video goes viral, everyone will know how special
you are. Last Thanksgiving, the supermarket owner held a 0 yuan purchase promotion in order to make more money. But before the event started, the boss's daughter, Alice, brought her friends into the store to make purchases in advance, which angered those waiting outside and even aroused people's hatred towards privileges. So crowds flooded into the supermarket, causing a tragic stampede incident. So this year's Thanksgiving, the killer is going to kill these privileged individuals to cheer everyone up. The killer cut off a piece of thigh meat for the boss to taste the first bite, but who can eat his wife's meat? Just as the boss was in a dilemma, Xiaohei untied the rope and suddenly stood up to attack the killer. The boss only managed to avoid a disaster. While the killer was fighting with Xiaohei, Lise also cut the rope and ran out. But immediately, the killer gave Xiaohei an axe and immediately went to pursue Lise. At this moment, Lise happened to flip over the barbed wire, and the killer looked at the direction Lise was running away, lost in thought. In no time, Lise ran onto the street and saw a police car parked on the road. Lise immediately approached for help, only to find the sheriff lying on the ground, apparently under attack. At this moment, Lise saw a figure flash into the front room. Lise immediately pulled out the sheriff's gun and chased after him, only to see curly hair sneaking inside. Perhaps he was the killer maniac. Just as Lise felt incredulous, the sheriff came in. He took the gun from Lise's hand and asked him to hurry out, but as soon as Lise arrived outside, the gunfire rang out. In no time, the sheriff came out, and this murder was committed. Then the two of them gathered together, and the sheriff's testimony indicated that Curly was the culprit who killed multiple people in a row. After rescuing the other people who were tied up, the sheriff immediately deployed a large number of police forces to search for and capture Curly. However, he noticed that there were several ears standing on the sheriff's pants legs, and there was a spine growing near the barbed wire. When Lise escaped earlier, his legs were also covered in ears, and the sheriff had been in the city. How could he have been stained with ears? Unless he is the real culprit. Although Lise understood this matter, he lacked facial expression management. Judging from his frightened gaze, the sheriff knew he had exposed his true identity, but he no longer needed to act again. Pressure only.
I've been stuck on the fence a second longer.
The slightest escape left the sheriff deeply regretful, like a thrilling final where he won steadily but lost points in the final moments, but fortunately, he was able to catch up on the points. The sheriff closed the door and put on black gloves, preparing to deal with Lise. Lise felt incredulous as to why the sheriff, as a law enforcement officer, should be so cruel. It turned out that the blonde woman who was killed by Fat Sister during last year's Thanksgiving shopping event was the love of the sheriff, and she was already pregnant. However, the sheriff's imagined happy life was completely destroyed by the accident, so he launched revenge to eliminate those selfish, greedy, and arrogant participants. Chris had already opened his phone and broadcasted everything just now, but when the sheriff gave a fatal blow, Jen Curly broke the glass and rushed in, rescuing Lise in time. But as soon as they ran out, the sheriff held an axe and blocked the way, which frightened Lise greatly. Fortunately, at this moment, he saw the little yellow duck during the parade, next to which was a can of light air. Lise quickly turned on the inflation switch. As the sheriff approached, Lise decisively took out his gun and shot the yellow duck with one shot. The sheriff was instantly engulfed by the flames, but Lise drove away. However, when cleaning up the scene, the body of the sheriff was not found, which surprised Lise in his heart. And at that moment, a firefighter wrapped in rocks walked out, holding the axe in his hand. Alright, that's all for today's story. I'm from Xiaoban. See you next time.